to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share a recent conversation with Matt Ohlson. Matt is an alumnus in the full-time MBA class of 2024 here at the Darden School of Business, and he and I recently connected to talk about what he's been up to since graduation, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, how Darden has impacted his life, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Matt Ohlson. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate you having me on.
Great to talk with you. How's everything? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful morning here in Seattle. I just fresh off watching the college football national championship last night, and seeing Indiana do a great program turnaround. And we can talk about all the business leadership lessons that comes from how that program has been turned around. But that's been fun to watch this year.
Yeah, amazing Cinderella story. The losingest program in college football history has a 16-0 undefeated season. Never been done before. Amazing.
Right. And it certainly gives me hope for how the University of Virginia football team might, after the grade 11 win season this year, how they might continue that momentum under Tony Elliott. So I'm excited.
Yeah, some interesting what ifs for Virginia football this year. All they had to do was beat Duke, a team they had already beaten once this year. All they had to do was beat Duke in the ACC championship game, played their worst game of the season in many ways, and still had a chance to win that game in overtime. And who knows, getting the college football playoff. They look great in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. So some things to build on. Got to find a quarterback, I think, or you got to find maybe a few more players too. That's the nature of college football these days.
Right. Yep. Yeah. We'll see how it evolves. It'll be an interesting journey with the changing landscape. So.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for taking time out of your morning for the conversation. It's always great to connect with alumni here on the podcast. Not something we get to do all the time, but always great when we're able to. We always start with the same first question. So, tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Sure. So I'll start by saying I spent the first 27 years of my life in Virginia. Was born there. Did K through 12 there. Undergraduate degree in economics at UVA, and then spent 3 years in Northern Virginia post-grad working at Northrop Grumman, just in various cross-functional business analyst roles, and then went to Darden at that point as a part of the Future Year Scholars Program, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. And during Darden, was involved in things such as the First Year Student Admissions Committee, was the vice president of communications for the Darden Student Association, and was also a student interviewer for the full-time program with admissions, which I really enjoyed as well. And after Darden, moved out to the West Coast, where I joined the Clorox company as an associate brand manager, which was where I spent about a year. A little over a year, and then moved up to Seattle this past summer, just to be closer to my long-term partner, Neely Kibler, who I also met at Darden, actually, which they always talk about, how it's you can meet your partner at Darden. That wasn't my intention going in, but it's funny how these things work out. And I think in general right now, just looking for my next opportunity. I really enjoyed my time as a associate brand manager at Clorox, but excited for what is next here in the Pacific Northwest.
I appreciate that. All kinds of connections that come up when you go to business school. How did you decide that you wanted to pursue an MBA? Was that something you always thought about?
Yeah. So it sort of came up at some point in undergrad when I had this choice between pursuing an economics major at UVA or going into the commerce school. So for those that aren't familiar, the undergraduate business program at UVA is the McIntire School of Commerce. And I just, as everybody seems to. When I first came in to my undergraduate program at UVA, I said, "Well, I'm going to be pre-com. That's what I'm going to do. I like business. I'd always enjoyed the more math oriented economics business courses that I took in high school, and so I said, well, that's a natural fit. And I was sitting in the intro commerce class and the intro economics class, which was taught by the legendary UVA economics professor Ken Elzinga. And I said, I really enjoy this economics thing a lot more than this commerce thing. And that's certainly no disrespect to the McIntyre School. It's a fantastic program. I just decided at that point in time that it was probably better for me to pursue a more liberal arts background for my undergraduate degree. And then I always had in my mind that I was probably going to go get a master's degree of some sort. And so I said, hey, why not do this undergraduate more liberal arts degree? And you can argue that economics is necessarily you know in the liberal arts category, but a more generalized undergraduate degree, and then uh, pursue an MBA a few years down the road, and that would be kind of my formalized business education.
Appreciate that background. And as a UVA undergrad, imagine Darden was always on your radar, but what got you interested in Darden?
Yeah, it was a couple things. One, I really developed a fondness. I would say I think that's the right word. I really developed a fondness for the University of Virginia during my time there as an undergraduate. I just really love that community, and I think it's a very special place. Just the university in general, and I saw that Darden both had this new future year scholars program that popped up during I think my third year of undergrad, and that whole concept was very appealing to me because I said, hey, this prospect of applying right after I finished my undergraduate studies and then deferring my admission for a few years, being able to work out in the professional world and not worry about optimizing my GMAT score while I'm trying to work a full time job, and also tr- going through that selection process of the MBA, which can be very intense and rigorous, certainly, as you get into the later stages of it. And um, just given that I had that idea in my head of doing an MBA, I said, I'm gonna uh, shoot my shot with Darden in this future scholars capacity, and also the case method was very appealing to me as well as a way of learning, and part of that comes from the uh, just classroom nature of learning and the Socratic method of learning. I actually uh, have a speech stutter, and this idea of going into a Socratic method classroom, being forced to well, I say forced, but it's having to speak consistently with confidence about a point, um, and arguing my point in front of a classroom of 70 people. That was the most appealing thing to me about what a Darden education can offer. And so that's the story around why Darden, I guess, in in a long-winded way.
Well, Matt, you mentioned the learning experience here at Darden, which is certainly a big attraction for a lot of students. But you mentioned the classroom environment, Socratic, discussion-based learning. Obviously, a lot of people with prior educational experience, maybe they had small group conversations, maybe a seminar type class, but haven't been in a case discussion before. And so there's a learning curve for everyone. What was the adjustment like for you? Someone who you mentioned you have a stutter, maybe speaking in class was something that you had to work at a bit. I'm curious what that adjustment was like.
Yeah, I would say it was definitely challenging at first. When you first enter core, and this wasn't just the case for me; it was the case for a number of my classmates. It can be very daunting, having to go in, having read a case, and to either answer the cold call at the first at the start of class, or to try to get your hand up and make a point or articulate a point at the what you deem to be the right moment. Sometimes you have certain points kind of stocked up that you're ready to give at some point in the class because it's going to be a major point. And I think it's going from that mindset to just being prepared, but also having a free flowing mindset of, I'm going to see where this discussion goes. I'm going to, think on the fly because that's how things work out in the business world. And uh, that comes with time, and it comes with the comfort of having every core class with the same group of people and getting to know, the other 68, 69 people in that classroom. Um, and you start to learn about each other's backgrounds, know how everyone uh, tends to bring up points or articulate points, and so it creates a safe but challenging environment. I would say to you know just say whatever is on your mind that is reasonable and makes sense. And I just think that practice is incredibly useful, as you get out into situations in the real world where it may not be as safe, and it may be just as challenging.
A lot of opportunity to practice to get reps in, so to speak. What section were you?
It was Section D, Dragons.
Okay, what was your favorite section norm? Something your section did as a group?
We had one. I mean, I think honestly, and it sounds a little cliche. I think the best one was just to be respectful of everyone else's time when they were speaking, and so not whispering kind of in the background while others were speaking. And also, there was this one norm that may have been unique to my section where you raised your nameplate up in the air if you had a technical question about what was going on versus a point to make about the actual content. And I think that created a very good learning environment for folks that didn't have a business background, so to just be able to ask questions about what the actual topic was, and how because you have people that come into Darden that were business majors and worked in banking or consulting before coming to Darden, and then you have we had someone in our section who was a speech pathologist uh, prior to Darden, and so it's um, it definitely is not necessarily, I would say, a level knowledge playing field when you first come into this classroom. And I think just I think creating that environment for folks to be able to ask those questions that may come across as quote unquote dumb questions, which we always said there were no dumb questions, but just giving a safe environment for people to ask those.
Appreciate that. And you're right. Everybody comes from sort of a different background. There is no one right academic or professional background for Darden. I think that's one of the great things about the classroom is that you have so many different kinds of people there. You mentioned sort of progression of like where you started to where you were kind of at the end of your first year. Could you feel, did class get easier, participating in class get easier, the material get easier? I'm curious what that progression looked like to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say it got easier. I think I got more comfortable inserting myself into challenging conversations. And if you talk to my classmates, they'll probably remember that I did not speak as much. I was never high in the participation realm in my classes, and I fully acknowledge that. But I think that as the year progressed, I went from speaking, maybe once in a class, maybe to actively at least trying to make at least 1 point per class, hopefully two. And the whole idea is just leaning into the discomfort of it and saying, hey, I may not be confident in this point, but I feel like it's a good point to add. And if it's incorrect, others won't judge me. Somebody will help me along to find the right answer, or at least help me see a different point of view. Um, and so I think it's being in a good community that all supports each other that creates that type of trust. And I think that's what to me is specifically so great about the Darden community is that there is that environment of trust where everybody understands that there are contesting points, there are clarification points given in class that aren't meant to ruffle feathers or anything like that. It's just meant to encourage the debate and try to get to a more informed uh, solution or answer to whatever case we have in front of us.
I think that's a great point, and the culture of Darden, I think, is really something that's kind of paramount to the educational experience, right? It's not just case method; it's case method with this community component. People being sort of supportive of each other and very much invested in each other's success. I'm curious, as you turned your attention to your second year, what did that year look like? Were you involved outside the classroom? What kind of electives did you take?
Yeah. So first on the involvement point, it was really, I would say that there were two major things I was involved in. One was the DSA VP of Communications. So the Darden Student Association being the student body elected board that works pretty much like any student body elected board you would see at any university. It's working with the administration to ensure that students are advocated for, and their different initiatives that students care about are executed. So I was the communications under that. So basically working with um, Alyssa Talabot, our president, and as well as any of the other folks on the board to ensure that we were communicating a cohesive message. I always said it was a little bit um, ironic that a person with a speech stutter would be the communications guy on the on DSA, but I really enjoyed the role. I had I got a lot better, I think, at Instagram while I was in that role, just leading the DSA Instagram. But it certainly, with all the different responsibilities, was definitely a role that took up some time, and then was also a student interviewer as well for Darden admissions, and so that's a selective process with admissions where you apply to be a student interviewer, and then I can't remember exactly how many prospective students I interviewed, but they're selected by admissions for an interview, and then they come in and you sit down with them for I think half-hour conversation, 45-minute conversation, just to understand why they're interested in Darden, what they could bring to the Darden community, what their background is, and then you just write recommendations to admissions on whether you think they would be a good fit for Darden. And you don't have the final say. I don't think as anybody should in the student capacity, but it's just a nice. It's just a nice extra data point to say, hey, we from people that are currently in the program, how do they think that this person would fit into the community? And I think that generally works well. You just want to make sure, and us being a very special community, you just want to make sure that the people that come into it, are the right fit. You want to make sure of that because it could be that they're very bright, very talented, but they might fit better at another school. And so, we want to make sure that we're um, doing the right due diligence there.
What was it like to be on the other side of the table, so to speak, as a student interviewer? Obviously, you'd gone through the application process. What was it like to interview people?
Yeah, because I distinctly remember my interview in that in that sense. But I think that it's being so close to the other side of it. Just 2 year. Well, for me it was earlier because I was a future year scholar and interviewed earlier. But being so close to the other side of it, um, I think you can approach the process from a little bit of a different perspective as a student when you're interviewing folks because you just understand. You're one, you're not as far removed from the process, but you also can, I think, treat it with a more empathetic lens in the sense of being a student, understanding that what they're interviewing for is where you are right now, and I think also hearing their story and um, evaluating them, not on the necessarily what you think personally about their story, but saying taking a more objective view and saying, well, regardless of what I think, how would they actually fit in this community if I'm thinking objectively? And I think that's also just good practice for life. You're gonna, I think a lot of us will be business leaders in um, in the position to interview and hire people in the future, and it's good to always kind of remove your own personal self out of the equation and say, okay, but based on what I'm evaluating them on, how do they actually fit into this equation?
So, Matt, at Darden, students' career goals can sometimes evolve from where they were when they started to ultimately what they decide to do after graduation. How did your career goals evolve? Did they change? If they changed at all?
Yeah. So when I first was admitted to Darden, I you know, figured I'd probably do the consulting path because that's what everybody else seems to do, and that seemed like a fine path. But as I got closer to matriculation, had some conversations with current students at the time, and really evaluated what I was looking for. I landed on the general management, operations and marketing path as something that would make a lot of sense for me, just because I valued more on the work life balance and than traditional consulting and banking tend to offer. And I also like doing a lot of cross functional work and being sort of a person that knows a little bit about a lot, being in the center of things, making you know business decisions based on a lot of different data points of information, maybe not complete information, and so that really lent itself a lot better to the leadership development programs of the general management, operations, and marketing realm. And so that's when I first stepped on grounds for day one of class. That's what I really started pursuing pretty heavily. And I think in that spirit, I didn't necessarily um, succeed in recruiting for that my first year. I actually interned at UPS in Atlanta, which was a great experience. It wasn't necessarily, I would say, what I was first looking for and what I ultimately chose to do. I ended up re-recruiting second year, as a lot of students do. They see an internship as a test run for what you know might be, or what they might want to do, but then things change and they realize that it may not be, and that's the point of an internship. And so I ended up uh, re-recruiting in the fall, and then I got the job at Clorox as an associate brand manager, which was much more general management focused, even in the marketing sense, where you are really the center of things. You're driving all the different functions towards an organizational goal, and I felt a lot more comfortable in that setting and saying that, this is the type of role that I want to do uh, longer term in my career versus a higher level marketing strategy role where you're not principally focused on um, both the strategy and the execution piece. It's more the higher level strategy.
So you've been out for a little while. You graduated from Darden in 24. So almost a couple years at this point, maybe about a year and a half. Um, how has your Darden experience been helpful to you as you've navigated these early days of your post MBA career?
Yeah, it's a couple things. One is I really do think that the way Darden teaches students through the case method has helped me think about business problems out in the real world, how to structure my thoughts, how to make a case to leadership. How to also do even things as simple as postmortems. When you say what went well or what didn't go well about this project we did. It's just it's a it, the way we do the case method, Darn, is just a very good way of teaching these types of things, and also the electives later in the year. We had and I didn't necessarily want to get into specific professors or classes because there are too many that I like to call out on here, and too many professors that I really enjoyed having to list them all here. But the general managers taking action class by Jackie Doyle. She teaches to second years that largely, was you know in many cases Darden alumni, but really senior proven business leaders, coming to tell their stories and how they've applied certain levels of thinking out in the real world, and what they found valuable in terms of lessons from that. And just hearing that and absorbing it. It wasn't necessarily a class I took a ton of notes, and I did take some, in terms of the takeaways, but just absorbing it and listening and saying, okay, these are just great overarching lessons on how to that you can apply to a multitude of business problems. And so even when you get past core and you stop learning the really core functional business fundamentals, that those electives I think are just as valuable, and how to treat things out in the business world. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Darden network. I mean, I've had even in my time up here in Seattle, I've had a lot of very, very valuable conversations with Darden alumni that work in different industries up here, as well as across the country. Just trying to get advice about my next steps, and um, helping me try to work through that. I mean, when people say that the Darden network is very accommodating to other people in the network, that they're not lying about that. I mean, I think that I think the hardest part is probably just finding the right email, or if they are on LinkedIn very much. But if they see the message, they're going to respond to you, and that's I think that says a lot about the value after leaving here. And I'm even I'll be going on a ski trip shortly with a bunch of Darden friends as well. And so that's even 18 plus months after graduation, we're still planning trips, we're still doing things together. And my hope and belief is that that these will be lifelong friendships, that 30 plus years from now, we'll keep going to reunion, we'll keep staying in touch. And so I can't necessarily say the same about that many people out of undergrad. So in terms of the value, I think that you don't necessarily uh, realize the value at the time while you're in the MBA, but it is definitely there if you give your heart to a place like Darden, and you really believe that that these are great people around you, and that you'll continue to lean on and support each other.
I'm curious. Obviously, there's who you were, right before you started your MBA program to who you are now. Do you have a sense of how you have grown, developed, changed over this, 2, 3 year period?
Yeah, there's an argument that I've always been this way. It's just that Darden maybe has brought it out a little bit, but um, I think I've always had a lot of extrovert in me, and you would just never know that by looking at pre Darden Matt. I think a lot of people would say, gosh, this guy really doesn't talk much. He's very quiet, and I think what Darden helped me do is feel comfortable being myself in social settings and business settings, in different contexts. But I speak up a lot more in situations, and I don't say I don't just say anything that's on my mind. I think I've been done a pretty good job of making sure that what I'm saying is at least hopefully of value. But I think I've always had this desire to speak up more, and I just have been cautious and apprehensive about it because of the speech stutter. And I think what Darden taught me and forced me to do was be as I said earlier, be comfortable leaning into discomfort and saying okay, yeah, I might stutter when I do this this podcast, or I might stutter when I get up in front of a group, a meeting room, or in front of my general manager, and make a point, give a presentation. And in the past it would have probably been well, I'm just not going to do it. And I think now it's much more of yeah, I'm definitely you know getting the heart racing, and there's definitely butterflies in your stomach and all the typical things. But I'm not shying away from those kind of things anymore. And I think that that in itself is a very I think that's a very powerful change, and something that will set me up very well for the future. And I mean, I think too, as we talked about a little bit, this as we think about the future of what the MBA means for people in this age of AI. And everybody says, well, you can, you don't need an MBA to go do all these things. And I definitely, I can see the arguments for those points. I'm not saying that the traditional MBA is the way it is, can't change or isn't going to, it's definitely going to change. But when you think about the soft skills growth that you get from a full-time program, when you're in front of a lot of people from different backgrounds that at first you've just met, very accomplished folks in their own right, that are very driven and motivated. And I think the just having an environment like that where you can test things out, push the boundaries, if you're a naturally apprehensive person, that I just think that we don't talk enough about how valuable that is. It's always about a business context, but it's also the social context. It's also just out in the world, how you approach things, I think, is different before Darden than after Darden. And so I wish that people would give more attention to that when deciding on an MBA, and saying, wow, is this case method thing something that will actually help me grow as a person, not just as a business leader.
I'm curious about that personal growth point. I've heard it from a lot of Darden alums and certainly current students. Is that something you expected when you came to Darden, or is that something that you discovered was happening while you went through the program?
I I think a little bit of both. I think everybody thinks about an MBA when they first get admitted or first get in, strictly in a business context, this will, and understandably so, this will help me get to where I want to go in my career. And once I think there comes a point somewhere along the experience at Darden, or afterward, where you realize, wow, actually, this experience was not just beneficial in a career sense, but is also beneficial to me in my personal growth journey. And not everybody's looking for that. I mean, that there are people that there are people that naturally thrive in a case method classroom. They love debating back and forth. But then also, I think the case method classroom helps you rein it in too. I mean, if you're naturally prone to just raising your hand and giving your you know unfiltered thoughts to everything, I think the case method classroom helps you rein that in, and so it goes both ways too. um, but to answer your question, it's not, I don't think it's something I thought about all that much, certainly not in first year. I think in second year you start to get, you start to realize, okay, wow, I think I'm a little bit of a different person than I was before I started this program. But yeah, it's not something I think a lot of people outwardly think about.
Couple more questions for you, Matt. Thanks for your time and for your patience with all my many questions. You mentioned you were a future year scholar. So it's obviously a program for college students in their final year of study or master's students with no prior work experience. Um, what attracted you to a deferred enrollment program? What led you to the Future Year Scholars Program in particular here at Darden?
Yeah, I think it was knowing in undergrad that I thought an MBA was in my future. That was definitely helpful to know, because a lot of the deferred programs will have you apply either during your senior slash fourth year, if you're EVA, or uh, um, right after graduation, and so you have to know at that point that that's something that you might want to do. Other than that, it was really just this idea that one, I could go through this process and take the GMAT while I was still in undergrad and get that out of the way. And I know, in the future scholar circles, we talk a little bit about that, just as being an advantage, because who wants to go back and spend a ton of time studying for the GMAT when you're 3, 4, 5 years out of school, and you're kind of rusty on that GMAT math side of things, and there's more, I guess, inertia to get back to that point where you feel comfortable with that SAT type math, I guess is the right word. But um, so just being able to take that, when you're still in that mindset, is very helpful. But it's I think it's also just having the ability to gain admission to a program, because it's not the Future Scholars Program is certainly not unique. There's a lot of different deferred admissions programs, especially nowadays across the country, and it just allows you to have it in your back pocket and go get the work experience that is helpful when you actually get to the Darden classroom, because everybody has at least some work experience in some field. And it takes away this thought that you have to optimize for the business school admissions process. You can just focus on the work you're doing, and focus on growing at work, versus having to, you know, at some point in that journey, take a step back and say, okay, well, now I need to spend my evenings and weekends studying for the GMAT, and writing business school essays and traveling to business schools to see which one's the right fit. And I just said, listen, I already know I'm going to probably do this MBA thing. Why worry about that? And I can just take the time over the next 3, 4, 5 years to focus on my growth at work, and just optimize for that. So I'm not sure if that's everybody thinks about it, but that's definitely what appealed to me most about it. It also allows you to take risks. If you some people go work for a startup because they say, I'm not worried about how my experience is going to look in my business school application. That's perfectly valid too. That's a great time to do it, because then if the startup goes sideways or something like that, it's like you have a fallback. And so there's plenty of opportunity, and almost I would say an encouragement to take risks in that sense.
I appreciate that. That having a business school offer in your back pocket, freeing you up, giving yourself flexibility. I've certainly heard that from a number of future year scholars. So, last question for you here, Matt. What's one piece of advice you would share with prospective students listening to this podcast and thinking about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, I'm probably I'm probably a little. I don't know if this is a controversial thing to say or not, but I always am of the mindset that, particularly for the MBA journey, I think that school fit uh, matters a great deal. And I think people who look at the whatever rankings they want to look at and say, just go down the list and say, okay, I'm going to apply to all these and get into the top one that I am admitted to. I would caution against that approach. I think that when you look at the career outcomes that a particular program can offer, when you look at the location, when you look at the community, and I always talk a lot about the Darden community and how I think it's a really special place. I think personally, Darden is a it's a little bit in my mind of an equation of, do you are you excited by the idea of contributing to this 350 person per class community where professors are very involved, staff members are very involved in your experience. you know you as a student have to be very involved in that experience. If that excites somebody, I would argue that Darden should be at the top of their list in terms of schools are looking at. Maybe not the only school, but it should be it should be at the top of their list. And so, from a prospective student um, angle, I would just say, think very carefully about the overall fit of the school you're going to join. Don't just look at the rankings and say, okay, well, this was the top ranked school I got into, so therefore I should go there because that's automatically going to be the best fit. I think that's rarely the case. So just being more intentional about that, and then I think also just when you're in an MBA, particularly a full time MBA, just lean into the experience. Y- You know, wh- Wherever you are, there's going to be a lot of things going on in any given time. There's going to be and very little is forced on students in these types of programs, I found, and I think it's really what you make out of the experience. Um, and different people are in different stages of their lives and have the capacity for different levels of involvement. But I just think that the real value you get out of the experience is how well how well you um, approach the specific program you're in, and maximize all the things that are important to you. Um, and so I think just those two things, just be very intentional about where you go to school, and also when you're there. The 2 years could go by very quickly. Just make sure you're making the most of it.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for your time. It's great talking with you. Great hearing your insights here. And so appreciate your indulging all my many questions about the ways that Darden impacted your life. And best of luck out there in the Pacific Northwest.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brett. Appreciate the time.
And that was my conversation with Matt Ohlson, a member of the Darden full-time MBA class of 2024. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's CARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.